After years of protests, the last fiesta in Santa Fe was relatively peaceful. The Hispanic, Native, and Anglo communities came together in an ambitious attempt to reconcile the violence of New Mexico's past with historic pride. It's still a work in progress, as the Rio Grande Sun's Nathaniel King pointed out in the case of last month's fiesta in Española, which also claimed to be tempering its celebration. Joining us on the Line Opinion Panel today, we have former state representative and Line regular Daniel Foley, public health consultant and past president of the American Public Health Association, Michael Bird's here. For the penultimate time before he leaves us for 2 years to go teach abroad, Harry Van Buren, professor in the Anderson School of Management at UNM. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And Christine Sierra, author, UNM Political Science Professor Emerita. Good to see you here. Now, Christine, I want to read a quote from the start. It's from the official Fiesta historian and Northern New Mexico College professor Roberto Valdez. He told the Fiesta crowd, quote, "We celebrate that we came here long ago to live because Spain had an idea to hold on to North America by settling its people upon it and spreading the ideals of Western civilization all over. Our encounter with the local Pueblo Indians benefited them. Do not listen to the rhetoric of harm and evil and massacre. Those aren't true. They live among us, and that is proof of our friendship." Do you hear reconciliation in those words? Is that something
I hear
about bringing people together?
I hear terrible misinterpretation of historical fact,
Right.
of what credible historians for years and a major body of scholarship has told us. Conquest, which is what the Spaniards were up to, results in the subordination of peoples. And in the case of our indigenous pueblos, it resulted in murder, rape, and a number of other things. Yes, settlements, absolutely. And they wanted to bring women and took Indian women so that they could promulgate their numbers. And all of this is part of this complicated thing called conquest.
Right.
But to be able to state this in a public event and misinterpret and mislead, I think is actually quite atrocious. And I would say, as a social scientist, I can't believe that this is a historian saying this. So I'm very critical of that.
I hear you. Michael, I'm going to read that last bit he said again, because there's something about this that just rings my bell. They live among us, and that is proof of our friendship. It's almost as if this man's saying, hey, we were here first. They kind of came to us and were causing trouble. We let them sort of live among us, and they're happy about it now. How did that strike you when you hear this they, first of all? That's a problematic word right there.
Well, it's the language of a conqueror who is speaking to conquest. We let they, live. For the record, in the Americas, as a result of Western contact, 80 to 100 million Native people died, according to David Stannard in American Holocaust, his book. He's total. It's a false narrative. Number one. Number two, I think that there are those individuals in any group who cannot separate the myth, their own cultural mythology from fact. And they're too close to it, so they cannot see it objectively. And I think that it manifests itself in this kind of conduct and this kind of behavior. On the other hand, you spoke of Santa Fe and how Santa Fe has done a much better job of this. And then another example would be what Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has done a month ago, where he issued an apology to the California tribes for the genocide that occurred in California, which is well documented, and has reached out to engage the tribes in a conversation along the lines, I think, of reconciliation. Many of the issues we face today in this country are in fact, I believe, be it the genocide and removal of native tribes, be it slavery, are issues that we have never dealt with in an honest, candid fashion, and they manifest themselves in behavior and conduct that we see today in this in this presidency. It plays out again. I'd say it's old wine, new bottles, or vinegar, probably, I should say.
Right.
So it is not History is all a part of what we're experiencing. It continues to manifest itself in negative ways if you don't have an honest, candid conversation that results in some sort of positive outcome.
That's right. Good points there. Harry, if I dare make this conversation even more uncomfortable, there's another quote here I have to read out loud here.
Why not?
Right, I just rocked my world here. From Al Borrego, this was at a Fiesta event, a historical conference. He was a speaker from Texas, where he said this about Oñate's mutilation of Acoma men, quote, "All they did was cut the foot off. They could have killed them," end quote. I mean, insensitive is not even a good enough word there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
not even the right
incendiary.
continuum.
Right.
And this really is the problem in talking about history, in that we often want to think that history is about telling facts about the past in a dispassionate sort of way.
Right.
But the reality is the ways that we talk about history, the narratives that we tell, are really about our values today and the ways that we see ourselves. So I just got back from Belfast in Northern Ireland, where I'm helping my son settle into a graduate school at Queen's University, and we did a couple of tours looking at the Troubles. And if you look at the murals, for example, or you talk to people from the Catholic community or the Protestant community, same history, same essential issues, but told in a completely different way for a completely different purpose. And it's really about the claims that they're making today about the superiority of their own religion or their own culture, or the ways that they see themselves. And I really see this playing out here. If we think about what happened at the time, Spain actually exiled Oñate to Mexico City, and this was colonial Spain, basically saying, whoa, you've gone way too far here. And I think that just illustrates the real disconnect between what happened in telling that in a dispassionate way and the self-serving things. And we all do this, by the way. It's not just targeting this one person. We all tell these narratives in a way that ties to our identity and tries to make us look better than we are.
That's right. Daniel, I got a process question about this, which I find fascinating regarding both Santa Fe and Espanola. But for Espanola, they stopped a while ago, representing this fiesta, but it's now a private group, but one sort of led by a city councilor. Do you know what I mean? Do these things need to be pulled apart? Is that part of the problem here? The municipalities in both these situations are highly embedded in these things. Does it just need to be a private group completely, and they can just say what they want?
But they're never going to be.
Now the city's tagged with.
They're
this
never going to be a
language.
private group in these small towns. I mean, you're not going to have. This is an example when you talk about like the ethics commission, right?
Right.
If you're going to go out around New Mexico and find 12 people that know nothing about politics, don't have any desire for an outcome, to serve on a commission to regulate politicians. Like, you're going to go to a town like Espanola and find people with enough gravitas to start a nonprofit, raise money, run it, that aren't tied into what the machine is.
Right.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, these things are always, they're always a reflection of the community from which they come from, right? I mean, you can see this all.
Gene?
Oh, please.
Okay.
I just want to say
Absolutely.
the community that you come from. Well, one of the person that you quoted about saying they only cut off the left foot is from San Elizario, Texas. San Elizario, which we call from El Paso, we call San Eli, is a very poor Mexican-American community right on the border, right outside of El Paso.
Interesting.
And I think that the presence of what I would say is mestizo people, that is a mixture of indigenous, native, and Spanish or Mexican, is all over the place. So I don't understand where this person comes from,
Right.
who lives that experience and must in some way represent it
Right.
in his job with a historical district there.
That's interesting.
I would also say, though, that in terms of positive, I love New Mexico in the sense that we are a state of living history. We have rituals that continue to this day,
right.
the picking of piñones and all kinds of things, and brings people together, or distinctive cultures. But ultimately, it is a good thing to do, is to remember our past, even if we have to fight about it.
That's right. Mike, go ahead. A minute left. Take us
Yes,
home.
one of the things that's clearly missing in this event, there was none of the native Pueblo tribes were involved in any way, shape, or form, which means they were not invited.
That's right. That's right.
And how can you, Pueblo people have been here 10, 20,000 years at least, maybe longer.
Right.
And the fact that they ignored that segment of the community I mean, it's a clear statement. We do not want to hear from you, and that's.
Is that an opportunity in your view? Can Pueblo people go to these folks and say, look, okay, we see where you're coming from here, but we need to have a dialogue here? Or is it a lost cause at this point when you get language like this?
Well, I think the language is inflammatory.
Right.
I think if anybody owes an apology, these folks need to really step back and ask themselves, where are they going with this and what are they going to do? And do they want to move in a positive direction that brings people together or not?
There you go. We'll take a quick break with this group and reset to start our deep dive into education. See you again in a moment.